Welcome to Cosmic Scene with Jill Jardine. I'm your host, Jill Jardine, Master's in Counseling Psychology, longtime astrologer, psychic healer, and yogi. In this episode, my guest is Laura Bonetsky Joseph, a multi-generational healer, an intuitive, spiritual medium, wellness expert, crone witch, seeker, spiritual teacher, and more. You're going to want to stay tuned to hear what she has to share. Hey listeners, I want to remind you to support Cosmic Scene with Jill Jardine podcast. You can do that by going on to www.buzzsprout.com/958-528/support. This will be in the show notes. Welcome to the episode featuring my guest, Laura Bonetsky Joseph, a multi-generational healer and intuitive, spiritual medium, wellness expert, crone witch, seeker, spiritual teacher, Jinkadin Reiki Shihan, sacred activist, survivor of domestic violence and sexual assault, and founder of Healing with Spirit and Healing Trauma Through Spirit, based in coastal Hingham, Massachusetts, just south of Boston, Mass. Laura Joseph has been providing spiritual-based integrative services, programs, workshops, and retreats since 2006, helping thousands of people heal and restore wholeness, personally, mentally, physically, and spiritually. Professionally, while advocating for holistic health, survivors of abuse, and policy changes. For nearly 20 years, Laura has been helping folks who are experiencing a major life change and or suffer from a history of chronic illness, stress, cancer, and or trauma to face hard truths, address root issues, transform pain, bridge science, research, and the practical magic so that they can experience sustainable healing and wholeness by rediscovering the body's ability to heal itself and the power within. They can become their own superhero. Through her decades of advocacy and policy work, she puts difficult, sometimes unpopular ideas into words that communicate well, yielding to possibilities, healing, change, and growth. When the pandemic hit, she felt a calling to what she witnessed as a rise of harmful triggered responses from folks, which led her down the path to help guide people in turning their triggers into a power for healing, autonomy, sovereignty, and reclamation. As a result, this led her to start the Triggers and Spiritual Medicine podcast in 2021, and in 2022, she published her first two books. In her first collaborative book, Feisty, Dangerously Amazing Women Using Their Voices to Make an Impact, Laura shared her story regarding post-separation abuse and family court abuse, which debuted #1 on Amazon in 4 categories. In October 2022, Laura published her first solo book on the secrets to healing, an invitation to heal trauma and other root causes of chronic illness using the Japanese Reiki Gokai, which debuted at #2 on Amazon. Most recently, Laura has returned from leading a sacred pilgrimage to Ireland that participants called, quote, magical AF and immersive, unquote. Her philosophy is, quote, when we go on a pilgrimage in a container that is rooted and solidly held in unpacking patriarchal, toxic capitalist, neo-colonizer conditioning, unpacking and understand the history of our ancestors, wounding and root issues, and church indoctrination, we crack open parts of ourselves lost or stolen from us and the ancestors, that which flows in our veins. As a result of centuries of systematic oppression, we rise. Walls break down, healing seeps in, and we begin to deepen our path to unwavering personal power and reclamation without feeling the need to spiritually bypass or unintentionally romanticize harm or misappropriate other cultures' sacred ways. Wow, I'm so excited to have in the studio today my guest, Laura Joseph, and stay tuned for ways that you can work with her and her contact information. But with that introduction, I've just got to bring her on. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you for having me, Jill.
We got so much to talk about. First of all, we want to tell people we're doing a retreat June 23rd in the Boston-Hingham area, south of Boston. So it's not too late to sign up by the time this podcast gets out. And they can get in touch with you through your website, laurahealingwithspirit.com. What's the
Absolutely.
best way that they can find out about that retreat?
They can click on the website, go to the events page, and it should be right there. Should be easy to find.
So that's quite a treat. We're looking forward to co-hosting this workshop and bringing in all kinds of powerful energy. But you just came back from the Ireland retreat we want to talk about. I know that you also, as an intuitive and healer, you're very tuned in to the energetics of 2024 and what we have to reveal in the next 6+ months. So hit us. What would you want to talk about? What do you want to talk about? And let my listeners get vibed up.
So I guess the challenge is we can go into so many different directions and so many different rabbit holes, but they are connected, even though we sometimes may think they're not. So
Right.
whether we're talking astrology, cosmic weather, whether we're talking solar, whether we're talking even the retreat, there's a lot of overlapping themes. And this is an 8-year. Everybody thinks 8 years is always like this prosperous kind of thing,
Money,
right?
money. Yes.
And I think that's where we want to go to. That's kind of like a neo-colonizer concept. But
Right.
let's just say that one of the things that when I have been learning and tapping into is the duality. The duality is what is playing out. It's the duality that even in the pilgrimage, everything that when we were sinking in to each of the sites that we were going and traveling and doing our rituals and ceremonies and meditation practices, collectively, the duality is what kept showing up extraordinarily strong. So that is also what is at play. So we're going to be hit with a lot of contrast this year. Some people are experiencing that in drastic ways. And then you might find, okay, now I have a breath of fresh air and I can breathe a little bit. Maybe things are going to be okay. And then we're going to hit that contrast again. And then when you have that contrast, it's be like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. I don't know if I can do this, right? And then there's going to be this breath of fresh air. So what I always say is like, yesterday I was doing some readings and I correlated it to like the whale.
Right.
The whale goes deep and goes deep into the darkness of the ocean, right? To places that the sun doesn't reach. But when you go down into the darkness, right, symbolically the darkness, the emotions and all that stuff that we shove in that internal closet, that whale still has to come up for air.
That's right.
Still has to be able to take a pause and to be able to take a breath. The challenge is in the duality is when we start saying, I got to stay in the light, I got to stay in the light, I got to stay in the light, love and light, everything is love and light, that is not helping us grow.
That's right.
It is actually in the darkness. It's where we plant the seeds. It's in the darkness where we grow.
Deep in the earth. Yeah, you make a very good point. 8, most people don't realize, is the number of transformation. So, and it is the Scorpio sign, is the 8th sign of the zodiac, and the planet is Pluto. So what you're discussing is shadow. We have to go into the depths of the shadow or the darkness in order to see the light. Kind of like Persephone, who had to go underground with Pluto during the cold winter to emerge in the spring and bring the new energy and the new season. And when you talk about dualities, you want to give more specific what you mean by that for somebody who might not understand what you're referring to?
Well, one of the things that we experienced in Ireland was, we worked a lot with Queen Maeve, and we were in her territory for most of our time there. And we went and visited her tomb. And as magical and as beautiful when you're there, and you're welcomed and you show up in the right way, with honor and respect. Also, what showed up was the duality of desecration.
Wow.
So for the first time, there were people, and it was clearly people that were in the New Age kind of spirituality practices, not understanding how to approach sacred sites in a respectful manner that are some of them are 6,000 years old, you know. You don't go up and dig into a 6,000-year-old tomb and crack open rocks for crystals. And that's the type of stuff we witnessed, and my heart ached.
Wow.
And there was a lot of grief, and there was a lot of anger that I felt with the spirits that were there that were unsettled. And some people, especially if you come from a Christian background, might be like, oh my gosh, like, does that mean like, you know, evil spirits are being unleashed? No, but we have forgotten the sacredness on how to. There's a reason why the British didn't go after this. There's a reason why the Vikings didn't touch some of these tombs. Like there's an honesty of like respecting the spirit realm and understanding that. And then when we go in there, because we want Instagram likes and we want, you know, all this other stuff for me, entitlement spirituality, it's problematic. That's colonizer, right? That's the supremacy aspect. So there's that duality of here's this beautiful. The spirits are welcoming us. They're saying, yes, we want you here. Thank you for honoring and respecting what this means.
The sacred site. Yeah.
The sacred sites, and respecting, I may not have all the knowledge and the wisdom behind some of these sites, but I always go when I introduce myself. I say, this is who I am. I did this a year ago, before I even brought people here. I asked her permissions. I told the spirits of the land and the ancestors that were there, this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to bring people here. I wanted to make sure that the spirits would be welcoming, and this is what the itinerary is. This is what I have in mind. And unequivocally, I got a yes. And the reason why I got the yes was because I was showing up as a steward, not as I'm going to make a business for myself and I'm going to get famous and I'm going to do all these other things.
No ego.
Right. So
just soulful intent here.
It's coming from a place of aligning with the spirits in a proper, respectful manner. So that is the duality, right? So we have this beautiful, magical aspect. And then we also have this mournful aspect. So you have both at play simultaneously. That's the kind of duality. Like when I was doing readings yesterday, duality was showing up too for some folks. And it's, you can be depressed and still be joyful at the same time.
Right.
It's that it's not one or the other. And I think that's what we're starting to learn. There's a lot of things weaving and blending and merging.
Very interesting, too, because as we record this, we're in early June, and there happens to be 4 planets in the sign Gemini, which is the
Duality.
two-sided, the duality, the twin, the good twin, the evil twin. And then Jupiter just went into Gemini for a year, starting on May 25th, 2024, and will be there until June 2025. So you're basically talking about what we can expect with the transit at Jupiter and Gemini in astrology language. But yes, I agree. I see that like people want to get to the light, but they think that they can bypass the shadow and the way to the light. And Carl Jung even described this. You have to go from the conscious into the sub to get to the super or higher consciousness. And everybody wants to pop from their conscious day-to-day mind, which only is accessing 5% of the consciousness, up to the spirit.
And people forget nothing is born in the light. Everything is born in the darkness.
Good point.
You know, and maybe that's why astrology has always, no matter how much I try to learn it, it always remains like a foreign language. But when I work with the ancestors, I work with the spirits of the land, I work with the numbers and the codes, and I work with the solar and cosmic energy stuff that I'm very sensitive to. And I just do a deep listening. I do a deep remembering. And so it's fascinating that you say that, because that's that confirmation to me that, yeah, you know what, you're right. It is Gemini season. So it's like the epitome of like duality.
Right. There we go. But, you know, you said something very interesting when you were, when you went on the retreat in Ireland and you brought people there, that you saw the desecration, and what you and your group are doing is the consecration of some of these sacred sites. And that's as simple as thanking the ancestors for letting you be there, asking the earth keeper elders, and asking the nature spirits, and especially in Ireland, all the fairy beings and devas or devatas. It doesn't take going to Ireland to do that. We can do that here in the United States. We have so many sacred sites. I mean, I go to Sedona all the time, and it's exactly what you're saying. You can either go in with reverence and thank them. And I started doing that more and giving the cornmeal and having a much different experience than doing, what they call spiritual tourism, which I never have done there, but most people go there for that. And it's the duality. It's so different.
So what we did is we started off with probably one of the most famous sites in Ireland, and I did that for a reason. Because they took a sacred site and they made a tourist attraction.
Interesting.
And I wanted folks to feel and experience what that felt like versus going to a local cave or a dolmen that is like not even on the maps. Like it's only where people know where they are. And I can't tell you some of the magical experience that showed up because it wasn't energetically polluted with tourism.
Total different vibe.
Total different vibe. I mean, one of the last places we went was a dolmen in the town that's like 5 minutes from our house, and we went in and there was a herd of cows. I'll never forget. That was like 200 yards away, and this might not seem magical to some people on the podcast. But if you just only saw and you witnessed what we did, we were like, oh my gosh. They literally spotted us from like 200 yards away and actually lined up like as if they were in flight formation with the head cow leading. And slow moving, like progression. And you're like, it's like as if you're watching a movie play out in front of you. And they targeted me. So they knew I was the one leading the group.
Yes.
And the head cow and I were doing this dance. Are you safe? Are you safe? Are you okay? Or are you okay? And it's like, are you going to trample me? Are you going to desecrate me? Like, like this whole thing of like testing the boundaries of the sacredness and having this communication with this head cow. And then I just reached over after making a small little offering, and the cow licked my hand and then backed away. And then a white calf, probably no more than a week old, walked up to the dolmen and started rubbing up against it. And if anybody knows anything about the significance of white animals, it's very prominent in spirituality. And everybody in the group was just like, you can't make this shit up, like my favorite hashtag. Like,
right.
And to me, it was like, if we were some of those people that desecrated Maeve's grave,
right.
It would have been like, we're going to stomp you. We're going to like get you out of here. But they knew we were safe. And they were protecting, or as if they were guardians of this dolmen. It was quite fascinating to watch.
That's wild.
An experience.
Well, nature, it's all the nature kingdom, and it's in alignment. And that's what we're learning to get back into. And you leading these retreats, taking them to these sacred places, also has the component of the connection with nature. One thing I would want listeners to know, why at this time on the planet is it important to go and have these kind of actual retreats or go and honor some of these sacred sites? I mean, it has been like that for years, for about the last 20 years. I say because of the portals, and that the portals are changing, or the vortexes. That would be like a classic response, but I know you have more information about this.
So for me, if you're going to honor the sites, and you don't have the training or skill sets, this is where I'm going to say well-intentions aren't good enough.
Okay.
And the reason being because I'm sure those that were mining the crystals in a 6,000-year-old grave had good intentions. Those that decided to carve a path on top of a tomb had good intentions. So it's finding the right teachers, and I've actually been using a lot of terminology. I aligned with what I consider indigenous Irish and people that live off the land, in the land, the way that we see natives here live on the land, they're not easy to find. They're not on social media blasting about these magical things that they're doing.
Right.
So it's really finding and aligning with people if you really want to do that. But just like when I work with trauma survivors, the biggest challenge we have, especially as Americans, is lack of understandings of boundaries and consent. And nature, we're finding nature and the spirits of the land, the spirits of the animals and the air, the fire, the earth, they're all getting kind of upset at us for not asking before we take. And not only do we take, we decimate. I go and I harvest herbs and flowers every day. I take literally maybe less than 5% when I go. But I'm always talking to the plants. Like one of the things I keep hearing to do for our retreat that we're doing for summer solstice in a couple weeks is the herbs that I'm taking. I'm explaining to the plants, I'm building the relationship, and I'm explaining what we're going to be using it for. So there's already magic being involved because I'm communing with the plants and I'm asking permissions. I'm sharing what I'm going to do. They're giving me wisdom back. I'm collecting it. Actually, I got a tray sitting on my dash as we speak, in my car, drawing as we speak, because, like, for instance, I'm not a big fan of cacao. Why? Because we as white women don't understand there's still tribes in Guatemala and other that are being persecuted. And we don't talk enough about this. And every indigenous teacher I have ever talked or ever studied with addresses it's not always the appropriation aspect. It's the duality aspect. We want to take the magic and the medicine, and we don't want to address our impact or how we could be a solution to the problem.
Right.
So I keep hearing to use some of the plants that we're doing to do what normally would be a cacao ceremony, but to do it with the teas and have it with, because that medicine is hugely powerful that we're going to be doing because it's stuff that I have been working with for 2 weeks now. And if you can imagine what that's going to feel like.
Right. That's beautiful. And it's done with integrity. And also what I hear you saying is the connection with the earth and the nature spirits coming through as the plants, true plant medicine. Very fascinating. My guest is Laura Joseph. You can reach her at her website, healingwithspirit1, the number 1 at gmail.com. That's her email. Her website is www.laurahealingwithspirit.com. And she has a phone number, 857-880-0365 for her business. You can also find her on most social media outlets here, https://linktr.ee/healing with spirit. Healing, capital H with capital W, spirit, capital S. When we get back, we're going to continue more of this fascinating conversation with Laura Joseph. Would you like more wealth, prosperity, and love in your life? Would you like to develop your intuition so you can make better decisions in life and you know what the truth is and not the narrative that's being run out there in the media and alternative media and social media? Well, I have developed an online course to help you. I'm applying my years of experience of helping clients have more successful, prosperous, happy, and fulfilling lives with metaphysical techniques, tools, and powerful positive processes. I have created a series of empowering workshops. Check out my online courses on Sanskrit mantras for wealth, prosperity, love, and to develop your intuition. Check it out at my website, JillJardineAstrology.com/M as in Mary, C as in cosmic, S as in scene. JillJardineAstrology.com/MCS. Welcome back. My guest is Laura Joseph from healingwithspirit.com. Off mic, we were talking about the phrase, God is back and boy is she pissed. And I asked Laura to comment on that, meaning the rise of the divine feminine versus the previous centuries of the suppression of the divine feminine or the feminine in general. And this opens a whole topic for Laura, who can speak to this through her work.
So I'm going to start off because I can go into Queen Maeve and the Morgan, who are the epitome. But what I just heard was to talk about the tree that we ended our pilgrimage with. And it is considered one of the largest single-rooted trees in all of Ireland. And again, we talked about the duality of the beauty, the majesty of this tree. And they say this tree is only like 200 or 250 years old, but we felt it's much older. And because it can sprout out new branches, I wonder, we kept feeling that the tree was actually thousands of years old, but it's because those older branches in itself have died down, but the roots are still intact. And here was the thing that we saw in this tree. We saw both sexes in one part of this tree. So it was almost the duality showing itself in every reproductive organ right in front of us.
Wow.
And so that really struck a chord with us. And I feel like I can't really talk further into that because I'm still integrating from Ireland. But what I can segment into is that Ireland, I believe, is either the only country or one of the only countries that was named after the goddess Eru. And so that really causes pause for thought. And part of one of the things I learned in doing the deep dives and working with some Indigenous Irish folks that are not really, that are really rooted in reclamation of the old ways, pre-colonization, pre-Christianity, is how every goddess became a goddess in Ireland because they were sexually assaulted or harmed by a man, whether it was a king or a priest or whatever. And part of their reclamation or reclaiming their power is actually what elevated them to goddess status, which I thought was kind of fascinating. And then I looked at, okay, well, let's look at, St. Patrick that drove out the snakes. And I know this may not sit well with some of the followers and listeners, but what I kept hearing was drove out the snakes because it was the women that, like, when you look at Queen Maeve and you look at the Morgan, it was the Christian monks that demonized them and told Christians that they were evil. The two goddesses that are known in Ireland to be the epitome of feminine power and sovereignty.
Wow.
And labeled them as evil and violent and like what we see all the time now, right? When we see misogynists and they go and they start labeling women that are really rooted in their own power, they start labeling them with horrendous names.
Right.
So
Negative.
it's quite fascinating that this also happened in the goddess structure. So like in Hollywood, some people might recognize, the Morrigan because she's a lot Kali-like,
Right.
which you can relate to.
Sure.
And if you don't have the right relationship with her, she will kind of mess you up.
Right. So then Maeve is more the Durga manifestation, like slow and steady and more, very appears as gentle and protective, where Kali is actually
not really, because
okay.
Maeve slept around. She had a free spirit. She got to sleep with who she wanted, when she wanted, and it wasn't all the band's call, it was what she wanted.
That didn't fit well with those Christian monks whatsoever.
Absolutely. And she ruled over one of the largest areas of Ireland in Western Ireland, in Connacht, which is today modern-day Galway, Mayo, Sligo, Roscommon, like that whole kind of area there. So
this is all part of, first of all, Mother Nature arising, and then the divine feminine awakening on the planet and within women and men. I'm seeing a lot of men who are getting in touch with their divine feminine as well. So this could be part of what this higher consciousness, what some of us call the fifth dimensional consciousness, is related to. It's, as you say, the reclamation of the feminine.
Well, I think it's more of, even when I go into my social justice, what I hear, it's not really the rise from what I'm seeing, the divine feminine. It's because, like what this tree showed us, it's both simultaneously with equal status. It's not one over the other.
Right. No domination.
It's really like equity. It's about equity. And it's been 2,000 plus years of persecution. We forget the one genocide nobody ever talks about. And that is the burning times of witches, where 9 million women were slaughtered, murdered, and brutalized. And, I can go on.
Well, we remember that because that was our past lives. But
right.
In history, it's been buried.
It's been buried. It's the one genocide nobody wants to talk about. So we look at all these little tentacles, right? And it's like, yeah, we celebrate St. Patty's Day. Hey, let's go to a bar. Let's go celebrate Irish. Let's have our Guinness.
Especially where we live in the Irish Riviera of Boston.
Right?
Yeah.
And really and truly, what are we celebrating? We're celebrating a man who took away feminine sovereignty in Ireland. And, we're celebrating. And we're celebrating, we were talking earlier about like the Sheila Nagig, and how she's supposed to be very expressive, right? And on femininity too. And I said, when I went into one of the abbeys, all I kept hearing and feeling was they put the Sheila Nagig up there to remind women their place in the system of the new patriarchy and hierarchy, that we conquered you. You were now us, ours, and you belong to us. And that is like, we celebrate it now, but I go, depending on how you interpret it, they want to celebrate it as a good thing. I go, but was it really? Because if you look at history, and you can still feel the energy imprints, and in that abbey, you could feel a lot of persecution. And then you hear the history behind it, and there was a lot of persecution, So how do we rise and we reclaim that? We have to face the hard truths.
Yes.
That's the shadow stuff.
Right.
To heal those ancestral stuff and reclaim.
And the thing is that most people are not even aware of it because his story took over her story in textbooks and in education. So all of this legacy of the feminine on the planet has been buried and not shared. And I think that as you're talking about today, it is coming out. And I think the younger generations are open to this. And even the way that they identify with gender, it's like they're both equal. So it's quite an interesting,
right?
It's kind of which is what, it's kind of an interesting evolution of humanity. But as you said, we have to make the darkness light in order to become fully integrated and conscious, even in our own personal process, not just the collective process, which we're seeing this emerging and evolving. And so many people don't want to see it. And even with what's happening in the media and the feminine versus the patriarchy, it's fascinating how it's all being mirrored.
But we don't realize that. And I think we get so caught up with the media, we get so caught up with social media, and all you got to do is just go out and just listen to the spirits and the land, of the water, the fire, because it's all within us. The fire, the water, like the fire, the water, the earth, the air doesn't need humans. But we need all those elements because it's all within us, right?
Right.
So we have to really rethink how we are showing up in the planet, and and really start listening, doing a deep listening. And I think a lot of this fast pace, go, 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 is a pure distraction and a tear away from any connection to the Great Mother. I can even go into that of Mother Earth's heartbeat, right?
Right.
And how that rhythm, the 7.83 hertz, is actually in our pineal gland. That's the link that's the science that actually ties all of life together on the planet.
Well, that's fascinating. I think we should go down that road because, well, what I understand and what I've understood over the last 20 plus years is that that heartbeat of the mother, known as the Schumann resonance in the scientific explanation, has been speeding up, which is also creating what I say like a little bit of like throwing things off the earth, people leaving their bodies and just some life forms going away, some new ones coming up. So it is all connected. And at the same time, the pineal activation within humans and those who want to receive that and see it, and those who can't access it because of crystallization or other blockages.
Well, yeah, I think it's, there's so many different ways I can chat about this aspect because we also have, is it activating because the Earth's poles are getting ready to flip and the Earth's magnetic field is 30% weaker and we are getting bombarded with more space particles, more radiation, more electrons, more protons, more energy coming
More
in from
EMF.
more, well, the EMF, so that's a whole other thing because I've been seeing a lot of people, just clients that are getting cancer at a very young age, and it's tied to cell phones. Because every time you have something coming in from the sun that comes in and amplifies radiation, what do you think it's doing to our cell phones? And men are keeping it in their pocket. And they're either getting things, especially around like their testicles or in their back, their bums or whatever.
Their root chakras.
Their root chakras, like wherever they keep it. But women are getting it like around the breast because that's where they used to store their phones, especially if you were in college, right?
Right.
So you're getting, a bombardment of excess radiation, on top of the EMFs.
So that's where there's the duality, as you mentioned earlier. We've got the connection with the earth, the earth energies waking up and transforming, but then we've got the bombardment of the radiation and some of the man-made technological debris that's hitting people and affecting us in our physical form.
Well, people don't realize EMFs, if you are on your computer or your phone 24/7, especially during a solar storm, it can deplete your melatonin. And so we forget that the melatonin is tied to the cryptochromes in the pineal gland, which is the particle that they found many years ago in another study in Europe that actually ties all life forms to the Schumann's resonance.
Ooh.
But the cryptochromes and the melatonin
You go, girl.
are actually connected to our inner GPS. They actually studied it and found it when they started studying in the bee colony collapses. And they started finding why whales were showing up in certain places or why birds were showing up. And so they started experimenting with EMFs and other things and finding that it was messing up their internal GPS systems. So it is tied to, if you're not regulated, it's going to mess you up and you're not going to, like I always say, I have very good, my language, sometimes I can forget things, I may forget names, I may forget things, but my inner GPS, show me once and I know how to get there. That's it.
That's great. Now, with all this interference from radiation and the enhancement by the solar flares, what is a remedy that people can do? I think we kind of know it and we've kind of said it. I think it's the connection with nature and maybe putting a rock on your back or lining up with a tree. But do you have any other suggestions how to counteract that?
Well, I'll just say one, there's a reason why I don't have internet in my office.
There you go.
So that's one. Turn your Wi-Fi off when you're not using it. Don't be on your phone all the time. If you know there's a geomagnetic storm or a solar storm coming, and it's going to increase, by the way, folks, so especially this year, if not next year. Why
is that?
Because we're in a peak year for the solar cycle.
Right.
So, there's all these different theories that the peak year with the solar flares, this is an 11-year, we're in the mid-peak of an 11-year, but even though we're supposed to be going down starting next year, there's questions of whether or not it may actually go down, because if the Earth continues to weaken its magnetic field, energetically, it's not going to slow down. So there's all these different theories that are kind of being thrown out there. Like, why are we getting an aurora when the level of space particles aren't quite there, or why are we getting a geomagnetic storm that's moderate or severe, but yet it was only an M-class flare that did it, when back in 1989 it had to be an X10 flare, to trigger the same type of geomagnetic storm. So there's a lot more science coming out. I just started noticing it probably about 15 years ago. When I knew there was something wrong with me, I thought it was mental health, and it wasn't. And then I started putting things together, before it became trendy and a fad now, and everybody's got a, YouTube channel now that wants to say these things.
Well, what's interesting? It's so funny because my rant is that like the tech is too much now. It's
too much.
It's created disassociation among the youngsters, and the radiation, people don't even talk about that. I have my little thing on my phone, the shungite to protect, which if people want to know what's an easy thing, get that shungite. There's other things you can do. There's all kinds of mediations. But I think what it is all happening is that we have to increasingly get back to the earth, get back into our bodies.
More trees, more trees, more trees, more ground, more trees, more ground, more trees, less concrete, less cell phone.
Right. And I'm going to bring it back to what you and I do and what we've done for years is connecting with people in person and healing transmissions in person. There's nothing wrong with doing it over the internet or Zoom, but increasingly what I have received as information with this preponderance of solar flares, we're going to see that the grids will go down or the electronic connections will go down. So I think people have to get used to doing things in person again and bringing it back home. We love cash. We love cash on Cosmic Seed.
Yes, be very careful of all the digital currencies.
We talk about that all the time. But the thing is, I think and then in our field, we've got the people, touting themselves on the internet. Oh, work with me for 5,000, 10,000. That model is going to go away because people won't have access continually or consistently, I believe, to the electronic medias and to the internet. So I think we have to get used to bringing it back home in person. And it's funny because with traditional healers like you and I who have been around for years, traditional, I mean old school.
Pre-internet.
Pre-internet. Yeah, that's what we mean by
Facebook.
That's what we mean by traditional. We found our clients through something called what I call the spiritual internet or ethernet. Like people would just find out. So it's so interesting to see how we are going to probably go back to some of the earlier precepts for doing energy or doing spiritual work for sure. But even with the tech, I think has maxed out.
Yeah, and I think you're also going to find, when people ask me about, how do we find teachers that are rooted and things like that, and I always say, those that are all over the social media with 100,000 followers, and they got this, and they've got the perfect body with the perfect $500 dress on, and they're supposed to be doing, I go, if you're doing that, that is all production. That's actually not doing the work, and people like you and me, we're spending so much time doing the work. And it doesn't even have to be you and me, Jill. It is every rooted teacher I have ever known. They are not on social media. They're just not.
Right.
They're not.
Right.
They don't have time for it.
Exactly. They're busy in the trenches doing the actual work with people. That's kind of the caveat. It's like you could be marketing and putting yourself out, but like you and I, who has time for that? Our social outreach is the podcast, and it is a platform to feature all these amazing speakers like yourself, Laura, and some of my previous guests. Unbelievable stuff. But I noticed that they all do have that in common. Like everybody has a website, but the time to blast out in the medias and the social medias, you have to pick and choose. Where do you want to put your time and energy? Do you want to actually do the work, or do you want to?
Well, the wisdom keepers, I think we have a disconnect too between generations. We have a demographic that wants to go and buy a certificate online, set up a spiritual business, and call themselves a guru and an expert or a shaman. with no experience, no lineage or anything like that. And yet we have elders that are carrying lineages for 70, 80, 90 years. They're starting to die off.
Right.
And we are missing a huge opportunity to learn. I mean, I had 2 elders that died last year. One, I still sit to this day with, I was just feeling like I was learning from this one elder before she passed, and so
they have volumes of information within them, and some of
it's in
them
our veins.
may not have even written anything or transcribed it out, and it's through the old way of oral transmission that you find out,
Exactly.
and or energetic transmission if you sit with them.
Yeah, and you can absolutely tell the difference. It's one of those things you can't really kind of explain, but it's when you meet these individuals, it is like, where have you been my whole life? And there's a humility behind it. They don't have this elevated egoic guru kind of feature. I saw somebody in the Reiki field that reminded me, they look like Tony Robbins speaking Reiki. And I go, the energies just don't match,
Right.
But when you meet somebody that's a real teacher, that's a lineage holder or a real teacher, that's going to teach you the ways, like Jill, and or others, they have a level of humility about walking that path. They're walking the path because most of us are walking the path that are doing this work, are doing it. I didn't go up to say, I'm going to start a spiritual business. I kept getting away from it. I had something else.
It chose us. We didn't choose it. So this is a fascinating discussion here today with my guest, Laura Joseph. You can connect with her through her email, laurahealingwithspirit.com. I am full of gratitude for you coming on the show, Laura, and I'm looking forward to our retreat in 2 weeks. Again, they can sign up through your website, laurahealingwithspirit.com.
And it's a summer solstice focused one too.
Right. We're going to be doing some solstice mantras and so much more, but it has been an honor and pleasure to have you on the show today. Thank you, Laura.
As always, thank you so much, Jill.
It's a great time to book a reading. So check out my website, JillJardineAstrology.com/shop, and pick the kind of reading or service you would like. I hope you enjoyed this episode featuring my guest, Laura Joseph. Remember to download, subscribe, share, and give us a 5-star review. This is Cosmic Scene with Jill Jardine, sending indigenous and earth frequencies as well as galactic frequencies into the quantum field.